Hello and welcome to a new episode of TEIMAS workshops. I'm Perla Gándara, and in today's session we'll be focusing on a key environmental policy with growing relevance for businesses across the European Union: Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR. EPR is now a central pillar of the EU waste legislation and a practical obligation for companies that place products on the market. Throughout this session, we will examine what EPR means in regulatory terms and how it is applied, the main legislative instruments governing EPR, including the Waste Framework Directive, the Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation, and specific regulations for WEEE, batteries, and single-use plastics, and the obligations companies must meet under these EU rules. By the end of this session, you should have a clear understanding of how EPR works and what is expected from producers under the EU law. Section 1. What is Extended Producer Responsibility, EPR? Extended Producer Responsibility is an environmental policy approach that holds producers accountable for the end-of-life management of the products they place on the market. The concept was first implemented in Europe in the 1990s in response to the increasing complexity and volume of waste in Europe. Traditionally, waste management was the responsibility of the public sector, and EPR shifts part of that burden to producers and ensures dedicated, continuous and sufficient funding for end-of-life product management. Today, EPR schemes are the second largest source of funding for waste collection and recycling in Europe, following taxpayer contributions. Section 2. Types of EPR schemes. Within the European Union, extended producer responsibility is typically implemented through one of three main models: financial, operational, or combined. In the financial EPR model, producers are required to cover the costs associated with the end-of-life management of their products, but they are not directly involved in organizing or operating the systems. By contrast, operational EPR places both financial and management obligations on the producer. This might include setting up dedicated take-back schemes, operating their own collection networks, or working directly with contractors to handle waste processing. Finally, the combined or shared EPR model incorporates elements of both approaches. It is often implemented through producer responsibility organizations, or PROs, which are entities created to act on behalf of producers. Section 3. Objectives and intended impact of EPR. At its core, EPR is intended to promote eco-design, encouraging manufacturers to incorporate environmental considerations from the earliest stages of product development. By doing so, it aims to reduce the environmental impact of products throughout their entire life cycle. Another key objective is to promote producer oversight of the entire life cycle of the products they place on the market, and also to increase the rate of separate collection for targeted waste streams. EPR also seeks to ensure the end-of-life management of products in accordance with the waste hierarchy. A further mechanism employed within EPR's frameworks is a modulation of fees, often referred to as eco-modulation. This approach adjusts producer contributions based on recyclability, reusability, or overall environmental performance of their products. In theory, this creates a financial incentive for better design. However, despite these ambitions, there are limitations in practice. One of the most significant is that current EPR fees tend to represent only a small fraction of a product's total cost. As a result, they often lack the economic weight to drive substantial changes in product design. While EPR has been effective in improving waste management downstream, it has yet to generate meaningful reductions in waste generation at the source. Section 4. EU Regulatory Framework. Let's now turn to the regulatory landscape shaping extended producer responsibility in the European Union. At the center is the Waste Framework Directive. Amended in 2018 and due for further revision by October 2025, this directive formally recognizes EPR as a key policy tool for waste management across member states. It lays down minimum operational requirements for national EPR schemes and was the first to introduce the principle of eco-modulated fees, linking producer contributions to the environmental performance of their products. The current revision, still under negotiation, proposes extending mandatory EPR obligations to new sectors, specifically textiles and food waste, with adoption expected in the final quarter of 2025. Complementing this directive is the forthcoming packaging and packaging waste regulation, which will significantly broaden the scope of EPR obligations. This regulation mandates that both commercial and industrial packaging have to be covered under EPR and requires producers to participate in collective compliance schemes, known as PROs. Beyond these central instruments, there are several additional pieces of legislation that impose sector-specific EPR requirements. The WEEE Directive sets mandatory EPR rules for waste electrical and electronic equipment, a policy that has been in place since the early 2000s. It aims to improve the collection, treatment and recycling of electronic waste while encouraging sustainable production and consumption. The battery regulation replaces the previous Batteries Directive and introduces a comprehensive life cycle-based approach to battery sustainability. This includes mandatory EPR obligations covering everything from raw material sourcing to end-of-life recycling and reuse. Lastly, the Single-Use Plastics Directive requires producers to cover the costs of waste management and public awareness for certain plastic products, applying the polluter pays principle. It also sets obligations regarding plastic-containing fish and gear and, through implementing Decision 2021-958, establishes the format for data reporting and monitoring of their collection. Section 5. Producer obligations under EPR in the EU. While each piece of legislation includes its own technical and sector-specific requirements, the core obligations for producers under extended producer responsibility regimes in the European Union follow a broadly consistent structure. The first step is to identify the applicable EPR schemes. This means assessing both the product category and the waste stream in question, as well as the specific regulatory requirements in each member state where the product is sold or distributed. Compliance is jurisdiction-specific, so multinational operations must take a country-by-country approach. Second, producers are required to register in every EU country where their products are placed on the market. This process often involves the appointment of an authorized representative to fulfill compliance duties on their behalf. Once registered, producers must either establish or join an approved collection and treatment system. This can be managed independently or through a producer responsibility organization, PRO. A fundamental obligation under EPR is full cost coverage. Producers are responsible for financing the entire life cycle of waste management, from collection and transport through the treatment, recovery, and recycling and public awareness campaigns. Under the forthcoming packaging and packaging waste regulation, producers must also report the financial contributions in a transparent manner, including any eco-modulated fees, and reflect the environmental performance of their products. Finally, producers are required to ensure regular and accurate reporting. This includes data on the volume of products placed on the market, the amount of waste collected and processed, and the outcomes in terms of recycling. And that's it for today's workshop on extended producer responsibility and its implication for businesses operating in the European Union. Thank you very much for joining us. You can follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to the TEIMAS newsletter for expert insights on waste and circular economy. See you on the next one. Stay tuned.